And here, here, for us.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So, in a society where you have a massive proportion of the wealth concentrated in a tiny portion of the population, and a massive portion of your population living below the poverty line, something is wrong. And what we're going to talk about in this debate is the fact that we think society should take action to correct this injustice. Now, we want to have a debate about principles. We don't want to have a debate about the nitty-gritty of policy. However, we are going to give you an example to let us some clarity of this debate. So what we're going to say is that we would tax high levels of income very highly to the point where there is an effective cap on your take-home income, which would be obviously reasonable and allow you to have a comfortable lifestyle, when the revenue from the taxation would be redistributed to allow people who make less money, people living below the poverty line, etc., to have enough income to have a certain quality of life. We don't want to get into specifics, we want to talk about the principles of why we take this kind of action. So we recognize that with this kind of action, the GDP on the whole would end up being less, because people would pursue wealth, etc. However, we think that the notion of people maximizing personal gains is archaic. We think the idea that more money and more GDP in a society always results in a better society is similarly wrong. What we think is that the relative difference in the quality of life of people, when you raise up the people with the lowest income and bring down the people with the highest income, is substantial, as in the people with the highest income suffer less, and the people with the lowest income have way bigger gains than the amount of quality of life which is lost by people. Which is one of the big reasons why we think this is something we should do. So first of all, I'm going to talk about sort of justice principles behind income and earning in a capitalist society. I'm going to talk about why we value wealth and why exactly we think a rich society isn't necessarily preferable. And then I'm also going to talk about the effect that this will have on social dynamics and how people live their lives, and why we think that this is a positive thing. So first of all, we think generally, income earning potential, while it has a lot to do with working hard, it also has a lot to do with accidental features like birth, where you're born in society, luck in getting certain opportunities, etc., etc. And at the same time, having low income potential, it also has a lot to do with if you're born into a lower class family, you usually stay in the class you're born in, right? We think this is an injustice, and we think it's an injustice that society should take steps to correct. Furthermore, we recognize that being rich and making a lot of money comes at the expense of the poor, right? You make money through competition. You make money by taking it away from other people. There simply isn't enough money for everyone to be rich. In order to have the very wealthy, we think that you need to have the very poor. We'd rather not have the very poor and not have the very wealthy than have both. And again, we think this is a principle of justice. We think this type of redistribution is correcting a very harmful inequality in our society, Sean.
So that silly massive concentration of wealth in some people's hands helps to create jobs that perpetuates economic growth for everyone.
Okay, so I don't think that it's the massive concentration of wealth in some people's hands. I think it's things like the existence of industry and stuff like that, which I don't think is predicated on having, individuals with absurd amounts of money that they don't even know what to do with, right? I think that what you just said is false. Alright, so now I'm going to talk about why we value wealth and why we value rich societies, or don't value rich societies. Basically, we think that wealth is valuable insofar as it gives you the potential to pursue happiness, which we also think is a basic human right. And we think that when you don't have wealth, there are significant barriers to your ability to pursue happiness, which we can address through mechanisms like redistribution. We think that, even after some sort of redistributed message is put in place, there aren't going to be significant barriers on people making high incomes in order to achieve happiness. We think in this society, we have everyone able to attain this basic level of human rights, this basic level of human dignity, etc., etc. Things which I think everyone in this room can agree that we really like. So basically, we don't think that a rich society is an end in and of itself. We think that a rich society, like a Western society, is good insofar as it allows citizens to, achieve their rights, pursue happiness, do what they want, have outrageous parties, Sarah.
But people often choose their happiness over the ability to make more wealth. why should we then penalize people who don't make that choice to get happiness now instead of wealth?
Okay, so we're not talking about people who've taken a job as a school teacher and are making 50 grand a year, right? We're talking about the lowest of the low here, right? People who can barely afford to put food on the table, people who can't afford to send their children to university, etc. So we are talking about people who don't make a choice not to have money, right? And I mean, furthermore, I think there's a hermit living in a hut. They probably, we probably would be redistributed anyway. Sorry, that was silly. Alright, so the last point I want to make is a point about social dynamics. Because Sarah brings up a really interesting point. We think that in society, when you have this ethos of pursuing wealth as an end, in and of itself, it does incredibly harmful things to the way people live their lives and the way people treat each other, right? So we think that, when people are just doing things because they think that it will generate the maximum amount of income for them, or generate, a fantastic amount of income, they become, overworked, essentially, right? And people lose sight of what the goods are in human society. We think that, when it comes to the very rich, if you tell them this is, the amount that you can feasibly hope to have in your hands, it frees up room for them to do, things which we think are positive for humans. It's a little bit paternalistic, but honestly, people who work 80-hour weeks have fucked something up, in my opinion. And I think that the state, is doing something good when it steps in and helps them live their life in a way which is better for them in the long run. Furthermore, we think that capitalist societies do have a lot of nasty competitive things going on. Obviously, this will be a capitalist society, more or less, just pretty socialist. Anyway, whatever. Competition and adversity and things like this, when you can only succeed at the expense of others, and you know that you can succeed over others, we think that it prevents you from having a feeling of brotherly love or sisterly love, which we think is really good. So essentially, we think that the inequalities in income and earning potential that exist in our society are a massive injustice which should be corrected by the government. We think that wealth has value insofar as it allows people to self-actualize. And we think it will have a positive impact on social dynamics. Thank you very much.
Thank the Prime Minister, and call upon the Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I really hope I don't veer into Joseph McCarthy-esque theory here, but I think that the system that they propose will essentially lead to the abolition of the society that we know and love. We'll have all sorts of pernicious harms. Firstly, let's address this notion of self-satisfaction. Because what we hear from side proposition is a unique model, an all-inclusive model of how you achieve happiness as an individual. Say that under their model, they explicitly say, wealth isn't a means by which you achieve happiness. We think that's hugely harmful and hugely prevents the ability of those who do see wealth, that do see the ability to accumulate massive personal wealth as a source of happiness. We think that makes them less likely, that reduces their ability to actually self-actualize in a way that is extremely harmful for them individuals. We say that everyone in society has a different notion of how they become complete as a person. We think it's extremely legitimate for someone to say, I want to be the smug person in the mansion on the hill, looking down on everyone else, provided I'm not actually reducing the rights of those individuals. I'm going to show how that's not going to be, how you don't actually reduce the rights of those individuals. So let's talk about the larger point of societal advancement. Because essentially we've heard a model of economics coming from the first proposition, where there is a finite source of money, and the more you think of it for yourself, the less everybody else has. When we look through every economy in history, we show that that actually isn't the case. What we see is that the people who have money have it because they've created products and services that people actually want to have. And the general population are richer for having these products and services available to them. I'll take you.
I really want to ask you, given the fact that we're part of the Commonwealth in this House, was it really that people were trying to
acquire the wealth that the British Empire accumulated? And was there no collateral damage to that pursuit of wealth that went to the home islands at the expense of foreign countries?
Alright, I think at the point at which you're... Alright, first of all, I would say that in many cases, there was actual benefits to these countries in terms of building railroad systems. There were huge harm, but those were largely because of colonial oppression, things like that. They don't necessarily need to flow directly from wanting to make money. Obviously, we're not going to you should force people to learn English, do all those sorts of things. We don't think industry is necessarily a harm. Let's talk about societal advancement. We would say that a lack of societal advancement is necessarily a form of inequality in itself. Because we'd say that under their model, there are still going to be people who are disadvantaged. We'd say that people who have diseases, for example, are disadvantaged by a society that doesn't have the technological process that enables them to cure them. We'd say that only under a capitalist system in which people can receive massive rewards for their massive efforts in developing cures for these diseases, you actually have a system that is able to provide a more basic level of quality for these people. Lastly, we're going to talk about this point of personal narrative. We believe that there's actually a value for society in having people of enormous wealth whose background and perspective is different. We believe that society is rich at the point in which you have people of different levels of wealth who are able to look on issues differently and to reflect on them and then share those viewpoints with everybody else. We think that we're much richer for the writing of the Great Gatsby. We think that this different perspective is actually important to a societal dialogue. Let's move on to what they brought forward. They said, firstly, that the justice is that it's unjust that you have certain people with gigantic levels of wealth. The question we have for them is, what injustice is caused simply by the fact that somebody else has considerably more than you? What we've shown on our side of the house is that the actual accumulation of capital, which is used to build factories, do all those things, is actually better for the population as a whole on an economic perspective. They say that a rich society is necessarily a poor society, and that all the wealth is accumulated in a few individuals. What we say is the reason that the wealth is accumulated in them is that they have brought forward products and services that have benefited the vast majority of society in a way that is ultimately good for everyone else. They talk about people make money at the expense of others. Well, we think that in the point in which you have, say, sweatshop labor, that might be the case. That's a good reason for banning sweatshop labor. But we think that in many cases, wealth is actually determined by, say, developing new methods of production, exploiting resources that weren't exploited before, or developing products that hadn't actually developed. In that case, what we don't see is a reduction of the general wealth. What we see is a creation of wealth that everyone ultimately benefits from. We think that's a problem. Yes?
Do you think whoever the dude is who owns Walmart would be super rich if he paid all of his employees a reasonable wage?
Alright, we think that first of all, that the fact that Walmart provides goods at a low cost for a number of people actually does make the citizens of the United States richer, because they're able to get their toasters for a ridiculously cheap amount of money. So material terms, they actually have more stuff. We think that's a good side on our side of the fence. They say that there are social problems in when one person has dramatically more money than other people. We actually disagree on this, because we say that at the point that social problems, that you can still have people who have different amounts of money and create the impression in society that at the end of the day, they're both human. They both have intrinsic values as human. They just have different resources available to them. We don't believe it follows necessarily that the amount of money you have determines your worth as an individual. We think that's a problematic side. So what have we brought forward to you on side opposition so far? We've talked to you about this notion of happiness. How it actually diminishes and restricts the ability to pursue the goals that they believe are most beneficial for determining their self-worth. I think that if my sole ambition in life is to own a private jet, then I should be allowed to pursue that ambition, provided there are not pernicious effects to everyone else. We think that society can regulate those pernicious effects in a way that's ultimately beneficial for everyone and allows me my personal freedom. They talk about societal advancement. What we have shown you, and what Romeo will continue to show you, is that the ability to pursue your own interests, the ability to make money based not on a government handout, but on your own personal merit and your ability to exploit, to use resources and to develop new technologies and your own initiative ultimately leads to a society that is better for everyone. We talked about personal narratives. We believe that there's actually a value to having different levels, having different perspectives within society. We think that we've been enriched by this differing perspective. We believe that everyone benefits from having a available thing. We're proud of it, though.
I thank the Leader of the Opposition and call upon the Deputy President.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Now, what we've tried to propose for you inside the first proposition is to look at sort of two different ways, two different guiding principles that we can use to model our society, model the kind of laws and redistributions that we use, so what our end goal is basically. On the one hand, you have pursuing this idea of wealth, of allowing maximum freedom to sort of make our society as rich as possible. We think in sort of an economic, monetary orientation. On the other hand, and what Evan and I are standing for, is the idea that affording as equal as possible treatment and rights when it comes to economic access to various citizens in our society ought to be the principle that we use to shape how we create laws and how we govern ourselves. And we think that our plan of not allowing this same extreme of financial gain is certainly going to change dramatically how our society is structured. We grant you that. That's a complete reversal. Evan said it's kind of like socialism. No, it's like totally like socialism. We're cool with that, right? So what we're saying, we think this is better. We think this makes everyone happier. And I'm going to talk to you about like where we think like these units of happiness come down. About like the units of happiness up here have less impact on the individual, a sort of weight on the individual, than your units of happiness for the person at this marginal, at this bottom level. We think actually is this sort of having a life that doesn't allow them to actualize themselves as a human being. Self-actualization, this is my speech, it's going to be really wanky, but it's going to be all about that. Love it. Okay, so first is the idea of what equality we think needs to be that most important guiding principle. We think that the only reason human beings come together in a society is to afford themselves with like the maximum kind of freedoms and rights they have with respect to one another. We think we're all operating as individuals. This kind of screws us over. We're also taking lots of money. We think though that nobody would ever contact a situation where they can be born by complete random chance into a situation where they're necessarily going to have a life and they can necessarily think meet a certain basic threshold of how human beings should be allowed to operate in our society. We think that if you're unable to sort of have enough money to live properly, or to feed yourself in a way that lets you have pursuits and pursue creative activities, and to have friendships and love and to be healthy, we think if you're being denied these things, they can come necessarily from having a certain amount of economic wealth that is afforded to you, given how we exchange goods for services and our basic structure of our society. We think if you're not able to have those certain things, we think you would probably be better off as an individual. So if we're going to come together, we need to at least meet a certain threshold where we all agree we are better off like this on some level than we would be if we were all disparate and not cooperating. This cooperation necessitates that we all have at least a certain degree of equality that allows us all to sort of have that degree of flourishing. The nature of our society is that some things are more commercially viable than are others. We think this is the problem. It does mean we have very strong sort of pressures on what kinds of pursuits we take on. We think this necessarily harms the interests of certain people. We think this is not very productive for actual human beings being happy with themselves. But moreover, what does this valuation of wealth mean for social structure? I don't think this really comes down to the crux here. It comes down to so much more. Why is our current economic orientation as our main goal in society incredibly pernicious? And what we're going to tell you is we think there is really a very strong pressure that gets placed on us to constantly be pursuing this economic wealth. And what does this mean for the kinds of things that we tend to do? And we think that we necessarily give up things that would make us more happy for ones that we think would make it more financially viable. Because we have this idea that a more wealthy society is an inherent good. But if we ever step back and critically ask ourselves, why is having more money an inherent good? The idea is that by having more money, we're all richer, and if we're all richer, we can all do more things that are good. Unfortunately, this trickle-down notion that we heard from first opposition, my dress always on buttons, the notion that we heard from first opposition simply doesn't happen. Because the American dream and the idea that economics trickle down properly, that we have lots of money going to the top, it ends up here from the bottom, we think simply doesn't work in most places in the world. So even though we're pursuing this richness for the common good, this richness doesn't actually help the majority of our society. It's a false goal. We think it doesn't actually lead to more people being happy. It doesn't actually help them. And we think that's why we sort of need to orient ourselves away from this kind of idea. Sarah.
Okay, Lisa, if I decide that I want to give up all of my happiness today in order to hoard enough money to see me comfortably through my retirement one day, why should I not be allowed to make that balancing choice?
We think that's a false choice, right? If we provide you with the economic So the ability to support yourself to a minimum standard, which is what we're doing on our side of the house. We're saying that potential to live for yourself is restricted so that you will not have to be as concerned with having enough money for your retirement. It's about having on your behalf. It's paternalistic. We think it actually allows you to flourish in a more meaningful way. But let's look at what we heard today from some of the recession, right? We put all of our eggs in this financial pursuit basket, and then it crumbles apart, and we've been pursuing these sort of fictional goal at the end of the rainbow, and we don't actually end up getting anything from it. We feel we orient ourselves in a very one-track way towards money, 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 pursuing richness. When that bubble bursts, we find ourselves with nothing. I think human beings should be more multifaceted, because that's something more important that we're pursuing. We want to structure ourselves such that it's something happens. Let's look at the more interesting stuff that I like a lot more, which I think sort of is why I think they're wrong about the self-satisfaction component of the house. I touched on this at the beginning. We think that when it comes to, like, let's say a scale of happiness, or a scale of, like, being a human being where you can actually be successful and functional, there's like a universe. You like to be about this happy. And some people are about this happy because they have lots of money to do what they want. Some people are, like, starving and they're really unhappy. I think the really interesting thing here is that I think it's like decreasing marginal returns of happiness at the top, right? Getting a little bit more, pursuing more and more and more at the top, doesn't have a meaningful increase or impact on your personal happiness. We think it might make you a little bit more happy, but you take that same unit of money at the top, it might make them a little bit more happy. Or in this case, like $1 million makes them like a little bit more happy because these marginal return. $1 million, you spread it over like 100 people at the bottom. We think the amount of happiness they can then get out of that extra access to money makes them dramatically more happy. We're able to actually spread utility much more meaningfully when we're able to take like these amounts of money that don't actually create much more at the top, the sphere of wealth, and we think actually brings a better right sort of going on a much more broader spectrum. We think the self-satisfaction point falls back to the house. Most of their points come down to like this pursuit of money. The very rich person, the innovative entrepreneur creates these economic goods that necessarily benefit our societies writ large. And what we've told is we don't think this actually does translate to helping most people. It's we're all trapped. We have all that Stockholm syndrome. We're like, okay, well, we need to pursue these economic lofty goals, individuals at the top, and then we'll all benefit. But we're not benefiting. People are not actually functionally happy, and they stop to evaluate. The government said, on your behalf, sort of in your best interest, we're going to orient away from this pursuit of financial goods and actually move towards an idea where you don't have that potential to do that, but at the same time you are able to think, we're forcing you almost to actually get goods, to actually get happiness, actually have units of utility, whereas with the under the status quo, you think you're getting it, you think you're running something worse, but at the end of the day, you're simply not. Everyone understands the principle of equality over the pursuit of richness. The pursuit of richness, we think, leads to a path that ends up with you getting nothing at the end of the day, and no one is rich even in that situation. Get back to my
Thank you, Deputy Prime Minister, and call upon the Deputy Leader of the Opposition.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I think it's first important to note that First Opposition has never claimed that policies that promote equality of opportunity are necessarily bad. We've only ever claimed that policies that promote equality of state are a problem. We don't believe that it's okay if everyone has the same baseline from which they can grow and progress, something like social welfare, something like a social safety net. We believe past a certain degree, once we begin taxing at the level of First Proposition imagined, we think that's the real problem, because then you have ultimately stagnation of society and a lack of choice of an individual. So both the individual and society suffer in this way. So I'm going to deal with my rebuilding in that sense, through the lens of the individual and through the lens of society. I'll start with the individual. What First Proposition told you is, look, they may think they're happy, but we know them. Like, we know they're really not as happy as they think they are. Mr. Speaker, this is a pretty bizarrely paternalistic approach to people's happiness. Like, if I'm happy about standing upside down, masturbating all day, that makes me happy. That makes me happy regardless of the decisions of anyone else. I think First Proposition, assuming that they know better than us what makes us happy, goes against everything we feel at our core of what an individual is. I know better what makes me happy than what anyone else in this room knows what makes me happy. So ultimately, we believe at this point, we believe that real self-satisfaction can stem from that pursuit of happiness rather than happiness itself. Real happiness can stem from attempting to better yourself in a way that perhaps could be impossible. First Proposition tells you that they think something's wrong with people who work 80 hours a week. Well, first of all, I'd say this room and everything around it don't exist if somebody was working 80 hours a week at some point. But we'd ultimately also say that that person probably found some level of satisfaction from both giving something to society and being rewarded for it. Because ultimately, we would tell you that First Proposition is offering communism without the teeth. It's like, basically, you don't have to work, but there's nothing we're going to do if you don't. We're just going to keep giving you money and everything will be fine. I read a pop sociology book that told me that people respond to incentives, and it sounded really reasonable. Sure, but Evan, ultimately this is how it works. If people know that ultimately they're going to get money regardless, a lot of people won't do shit. I mean, realistically, this is how human beings operate. I mean, it's easy to say that, look, people will want to better themselves, but people are fundamentally quite lazy. Those who aren't are the ones who are actually making something, but the reason that they are is because they're rewarded by society for doing so. We think the first proposition model exclusively disallows that reward for what you put in, and therefore makes it all the less likely that you're going to do anything at all. Let's talk about things like diseases that my partner talked about. We didn't really feel we had adequate refutation for this. We feel there's new lines that have been brought to it. Ultimately, if you think that society as a whole can be advanced through what you're going to do, it's only going to happen if you feel there's some level of reward for it. Even if you think what you're doing is right, there's still a sense within yourself that only through that reward, monetary compensation, promotions, and some sort of like fame and success that comes along with it, we think necessarily this is why things are done, and this is why things happen. This is why people are happy. The proposition told you, look, if you're only using your wealth to compare yourselves to others, that makes you a bad person. We think that just makes you a person who's exercising individual liberties. We think if you as an individual think that you are only good in comparison to people who are worse than you, that's your business, Mr. Speaker. And we ultimately think that that's what our society should and ought to be about, is that reaching for whatever you desire, whatever makes you happy. We think if you're at the bottom, and if you ultimately have not taken advantage of your equality of opportunity, or found yourself unable to, we think perhaps you'll find some level of satisfaction outside of wealth. That's also your business, Mr. Speaker. But only in the nuanced version of self-satisfaction and happiness that the first proposition provided are these options even possible. First proposition told you, we know how to be happy, and only gives one option for that. That's the equality of state provided from them. We think ultimately at this point, we know as individuals what makes us happy and what's going to promote our better self-interest.
We've been allowing a small segment of the population to pull the wool over the eyes of the majority. Is a harm that is a stepping continue?
I don't think it's pulling the wool over the eyes. Things like deploying them in like wool factories. They're like the only reason people are able to survive at all is because there is someone who desires to make a lot of money. If no one desired to make a lot of money, no one would have any money. Because realistically speaking, if there's nowhere for you to be employed, if there's nowhere for you to create something, if there's nothing for you to actually progress and advance and make something for yourself, then it's not going to happen, Mr. Speaker. People aren't going to become titans of industry when they know they'll be no better off than somebody who literally does nothing. Literally just sits around and does nothing. What ideal? What are we searching for? So I mean, it might seem like a really extreme, but at least in China and Soviet Russia, they like make you work. They like all first propositions provided for you is the idea that okay, you don't have to work, and ultimately we will reward you regardless. I mean, this isn't how human beings operate, and this isn't how a just and reasonable society operates. So I'll deal with the new things we heard from Lisa speak. The first thing she said, and I think like guiding first proposition generally, is the idea that equality is the guiding principle. And they talked a lot about how like it's better than people starving. $1 million of people who are starving would be quite useful. Okay, realistically, we don't think that anything that promotes equality of opportunity, like starving, we think is so extreme that we think people should be allowed to reach that baseline. We think people should be allowed to reach that baseline and progress past that. But ultimately, Mr. Speaker, we say that everyone has the exact same level of comfort. This is equality of state. This is the policy that the first opposition has this problem with. The second thing they talk about is they describe and frame all their argumentation as, well, it's based around economics and monetary. It's exclusively based on, like, your version of happiness. But Mr. Speaker, again, only first opposition has provided a nuanced version of satisfaction where you can reach it from any number of reasons, from any number of ways in which you choose to be happy. First proposition does not allow for this. The idea of economics is one that we accept. People like getting money, and it's something that we enjoy doing. We don't have a problem with that, Mr. Speaker. If somebody wants to promote themselves, if somebody wants to do things like cure polio or go to space, or any number of other things that we pride ourselves on as individuals and humans, we think at this point, without a reward, without some version of society telling us that this is something that is to be rewarded, and you can reap benefits from. And if you choose to, compare yourselves to others favorably, because they are lazy and you have achieved something. If you feel satisfaction from this way, we feel ultimately speaking, this is economics at its greatest success. Because it provides a great number of happiness for people. The individual succeeds and advances, and society succeeds and advances. It's this duality of success that we see on side first opposition that we feel was not adequately refuted. They told you, look, people are simply stealing at the top from the bottom. No, Mr. Speaker. People are providing and creating at the top, and then allows for people in the middle to also provide for their families and create for themselves. It's only through this mutual understanding of creativity, this mutual idea of innovation, and what it means for the individual to be happy and for society to advance, that we can find any happiness or any advancement. Thank you.
I thank the Deputy Leader of the Opposition. Remind him of his masturbation joke was recorded in the camera. Oh, member of government.
Mr. Speaker, if reward is the only thing that motivates us as a human species to actually exist and function, I greatly fear for the future of our entire world, because I don't believe reward and monetary incentive is going to lend itself to stability or social good. I think we've had an excellent discussion thus far about what it takes to be happy. What I think I'm going to show you is the tangible social harms you get from income disparity and how this outweighs any individual choice the opposition would like you to value in today's debate. For that alone, we value equality more so. I'm going to do this by talking first about the arbitrary definition of wealth, the accumulation of political wealth and its harms, and how this disables equality for an eventual downturn we are not willing to see on our side of the house. Before I do, a little bit of rebuttal. What we hear from the opposition is the idea that basically we allow ourselves a certain degree to provide for equality of state, and we're okay with this. I don't think you have to look very far to see how well social programs in capitalist societies are faring to help those who are working and are doing well to actually think this is actually supporting even their own definition of what they believe acceptable for equality to exist in society. But then he tells us that we don't reward, without people being rewarded monetarily, you're not going to have people working to do good. You won't produce any social output or any productive output. Unfortunately, it ignores the reality that we as human beings have specific needs. Whether or not we pay you, you have to eat, you have to have shelter, you have to have water. Basic things you have are going to be needs, and those needs are going to have to be met in a society where wealth isn't able to be accumulated, regardless of the fact that wealth exists or does not. So we believe in some societies, they do function well without the ability to accumulate massive amounts of wealth. Why? Because they see themselves as a community first and foremost, and that creates a better moral system of morale that provides for the all benefit of everyone in the society. They make this assumption that those who are poor are inherently just poor because they're lazy and they don't want to work, and we're just going to feed into this mindset and allow them to continue to be lazy. Well, the problem is, when we see criminal societies that exist today, they actually don't function like this. The society as a whole ostracizes and penalizes those who are lazy and who don't provide to the community in a much more efficient manner than we do in our capitalistic society that allows for those who not exist within the system. We think that of itself is a good that falls on our side of the house. So with that, I'm going to move into our positive matter. Because let's talk about some of the harms we see coming from valuing wealth over equality. We think, first of all, we arbitrarily define what wealth is. And this is alluded to a bit in the front half. I want to talk about this now. We understand in modern society that our obsession with wealth has come so far that it's absolutely hurt us on both the economic level and the individual level. Look at the individual's strive to constantly be competing with the one because of individual choice who has more money. We take out risky loans like home mortgages we can't afford to pay off and we lose our basic need for shelter. At a business level, we see the practices of banks trying to overvalue their assets for some sort of net gain and profit and accumulation of more wealth. This is all problematic and leads to eventual downturns because why? We see wealth as one thing and one thing only, the gain of net profit or status symbols in your society. And that's what clean lending allows you to do because you value that inherently more than you value anything else about your existence. When they tell you who are justified to find happiness in the way that they accumulate wealth, that in itself talks about the problem of the entire disease. He's identified it right there. You're only happy when you accumulate wealth because you understand wealth is what leads to security. When you take wealth out of the picture, you find security in other means. You find it in your community and those around you, and the other ways society will provide for you when you don't focus on wealth in and of itself. But more importantly, we understand that the concentration of wealth in most little democracies creates some great harms politically. Why? Because your happiness is inherently limited by the policies created of your government. Who runs your government? Those with money. The U.S. Kennedys, those who have power and the ability to influence policies. Because even if you find yourself happy without wealth, if you're that individual who sacrificed so much, your state inherently can still affect your ability to self-actualize. In fact, if you're in Saudi Arabia, the kings who have more money may limit your ability to
practice your religion, which might make you more happier than having wealth. Those people who live in a system where they believe autonomy of their body should be their own, but those who have more money create legislation, are going to inherently harm those who believe those tangible harms are important to their happiness. Ultimately, wealth requires a sacrifice of some good for someone else's detriment, and we're not willing to accept that on this side of the house. Go ahead.
Okay, so which historical communist society would you have preferred to live in rather than Canada?
Well, it's funny, because I live in America, I'm not really rich either, so I think I've already made my choice a little bit clear. The idea, however, is not to value a communist society in and of its holistic appearance, but we understand when we value wealth more than equality, we get these harms. We don't have to see it as one function, we just understand that insofar as we allow it to prosper and get to the point where that disparity is so great, we get these harms, we have a problem inherent in the system, and we correct that with more socialist tendencies. Maybe communism is not the answer, maybe capitalism isn't, but the more modern ground is obviously to value equality more than wealth. Why is this? My last point. Why this disables equality? But first of all, we have to understand why we value equality. We believe there's two reasons we do. One is a natural ability. Your ability to be on par in competition with the person next to you is a natural human desire that you should be allowed to fulfill. But unfortunately, in the status quo, when you're a child with a poor parent, you aren't born on par with that person. You're not able to compete, and you inherently view yourself as less valuable to the society in which you exist. What happens as a result? You either remove yourself from the society, or you violate its rules because you don't agree with the terms on which it was put upon this world, and that's problematic. But more importantly, the presumption that exists in our society recognizes the corrupting influence of disinequality. Every single piece of legislation we have made on any floor of government has to do with how we better distribute the distribution of wealth. Why is this? Because when you don't have wealth distributed equally, you produce political harms, you produce individual harms, and the moral obligation that we dictate to ourselves as wealth is the only way you have security has great consequences on how you choose to live your life. Understand, though, that when you see on this side of the house the actual harms that come from having wealth grow to such a disparate competition between those who have it and those who have not, there are direct harms that entrench our entire society. It's not like the poor are the only ones who are very well. It's also the rich who have to pay more taxes to help profit the poor. Why does this happen? Because we've told our society the accumulation of wealth is the only way in which we can survive and be secure, and unfortunately, not everybody can be rich, and that's just a matter of the fact. But more importantly, we believe on the side of this government that the absence of social harms is in of itself a good thing. We don't believe individual choice can override the social harms that are created by income disparity. But more importantly, we understand that equality as a whole solves these social harms much better than the accumulation of wealth. Because we understand equality leads to a better system with better social good, and none of these harms we are proud to propose.
I thank the member of government and call upon the member of opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Now, I might not be from the United States, but for the next 7 minutes, I'm going to defend the American dream. So I want to talk about first what wealth is and what it isn't, second what equality is and what it isn't, and then I'll get into some refutation. So what is wealth? Mr. Speaker, money is a socially constructed phenomenon. Even back when we had the gold standard and tied it to gold, it wasn't because gold was intrinsically valuable. It was because we as a society constructed relationships to define what that wealth means. So what is wealth? It represents relationships of needs, wants, and values. People who are rich today, Mr. Speaker, don't get rich by chance, don't get rich by taking advantage. They get rich because other people are willing to spend their own money to purchase the goods or services that you have to offer. It is representative of your value to society, Mr. Speaker, that you are eventually rich. Why is government's plan wrong? First, it distorts these relationships and creates meaningful and deters meaningful societal contributions. It deters people from being specialist doctors, from being innovators. And this is important, Mr. Speaker. Why does it do this? Because people often have to invest massive amounts of their own capital to take risks, to achieve accomplishments that create a collective, non-excludable good for everyone, Mr. Speaker. The reason we need to not have this deterrence in place is because people aren't going to be nearly as willing to take these risks with their own money and with their own resources if they know they won't be able to reap the benefits of it. If you look at any number of large innovations, whether it's computers, information technology, all these sorts of things, it comes when people put their own time, their own money, and their own resources on the line. They only do it because they expect to get it, Mr. Speaker. And in many cases, these goods are not excludable, whether you're rich or whether you're poor. I'm going to discuss that in a minute. But second off, we think it's morally wrong that people are entitled to the fruits of their own labor. The government didn't play any role in creating your your successes, they don't deserve to reap your benefits. Moreover, Mr. Speaker, it's important to note that money does provide for your future. It doesn't just have value today, but it creates value in knowing that you can create security for yourself. To respond to second proposition, there might be other ways to create security for yourself. We didn't hear any of them, but I still think that money is the best of those ways, Mr. Speaker, and that's important in this round. People do respond to incentives, and they will go where they're able to reap the most rewards, Mr. Speaker. That's why you see a great rate of doctors from Canada to the United States, for instance, because they can make a lot more money, because they pay lower taxes, and things like that. Secondly, I want to talk about what is equality, because notice that at best on proposition, you can have a society that is materially equal, Mr. Speaker, but I don't think that means very much in terms of self-actualization or all sorts of other important values. Now, one important thing to note in this round is it seems all down proposition benches, they're not arguing for true equality so much as a minimum standard of living that we should provide to everyone. That is to say, provide everyone with food so that they don't die. Provide everyone with perhaps shelter so that they don't freeze to death, Mr. Speaker. This is not nearly the same as the utopian ideal that they like to achieve, right? Because all their arguments support this idea that everyone will be equal, but in practice, the impact of their argument is just, we sustain your existence, and that's about it. That isn't equality in a material or a meaningful sense, Mr. Speaker. But you can still achieve all of those benefits in terms of achieving a minimum standard of living for everyone under our model, where you don't massively tax the rich. Why? Let's look at the role of philanthropy. Whether you look at people like David Rockefeller, Bill and Melinda Gates, Warren Buffett, that created all sorts of goods for the poor, for research into diseases, for all sorts of other things like that. This is better because, one, it's voluntary rather than coerced, so it's more appreciated. Second, it meets all of the goals in terms of not deterring this kind of innovation. And even today, since there are stereotypes and stigmas against being rich, there's massive pressure for people who do develop these massive amounts of wealth to reinvest it in their communities, Mr. Speaker. Back up.
Sir, without adding a value of equality, how does anybody actually access that good of the faculties except for those who are rich enough to do so?
Okay, first off, a lot of goods are non-excludable, right? So creation of innovations in terms of knowledge, creation of infrastructure that a lot of people make, creation of jobs, and those sorts of things that are particularly designed for the poor, I think is a benefit there. Moreover, Mr. Speaker, I think it's important to look at what government is doing. So we're perfectly fine, Mr. Speaker, with government creating laws that create equal opportunity to these sorts of things. So it's like non-discrimination laws, for example. Those don't tax the wealthy and deter innovation and reap the rewards that government doesn't deserve to reap. But it does create equal opportunity so that everyone has access to those jobs, Mr. Speaker. So how do we generate wealth in the long run? If you look at waves of immigration to the United States in the early 1900s, it might be the case that that first group of immigrants who got there weren't able to get rich and weren't able to get wealthy. But they surely got utility knowing that the structures created by the rich in society, namely the low-paying jobs that they were afforded, could create a better life for their children. And that's why they did it, Mr. Speaker. That's how they achieved happiness, knowing that they may not be living the same quality of life as everyone else, but that one day their children might be. Those are the structures that are created by disparities in wealth, whether we like it or not, Mr. Speaker. And it's, I think, just pretty clear that if you compare the urban poor in the United States versus the masses of poor people in more supposedly equal societies like China, there are both fewer of them and they are relatively better off, Mr. Speaker. I think that's important to note, that the wealth can drive those things. I want to deal with a few points of refutation. We hear in opposition this idea that wealthy people have too much power. Look, in democracies, it's votes, not wealth, that drive policies, and everyone, regardless of their socioeconomic income, is entitled to equal participation in the political system. So I think that certainly mediates economic harms. We hear this idea that people can find security in other means, but this is largely just asserted because I'm not sure what it is. In a society today, Mr. Speaker, wealth is the most important and the most critical way to assuring security because it can provide for your material well-being in the future. That's why wealth is important, not just in terms of what it can buy you now, but what it represents for your ability to protect yourself in the future. That's an important benefit. We hear this idea on first proposition that people with the highest income suffer less than the people with the lowest income have to pay. So first off, clearly this model isn't sustainable, right? It doesn't generate jobs. It doesn't do anything to help people self-actualize who are at the lowest levels of society right now. All it does is sustain them at a minimum standard in perpetuity, right? It's not as sustainable and it doesn't lead to self-reliance. So in that sense, it's wrong. But I think that's a really subjective judgment to simply say that the rich people aren't going to miss the money. I think money represents more, as I told you in my first point of extension, money represents social relationships and all sorts of other things that argument just doesn't take into account. We heard this idea that wealth, so the lottery work, people are born into all different circumstances. So one, as I already mentioned, you can enact laws that mitigate these factors like non-discrimination laws, things like that. But moreover, the lottery of birth happens to determine all sorts of other things, Mr. Speaker, but that doesn't mean we should be correcting for them. Some people are unfortunate enough to be born into very oppressive societies, yet we still have limits on immigration and don't let them come reap the benefits of our society simply because we think it was unfortunate they happen to be born somewhere else, Mr. Speaker. So at the end of the day, we have to question what does wealth mean and what is equality as a whole. Wealth is a representation of value. If people are rich, it's because they provide a valuable service to society, and we ought to respect that. And in terms of equality, at best what you get from the proposition is material equality. I told you why that's not actually the case, and all you arguably get is maybe a minimum standard of living, which we give you a better version of on our side.
I thank the member of opposition and call upon the government.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Apparently the extension we got from Professor Neil Ferguson today is that if we just subscribe fools to the economic theory that the drivers of our success are the ones that should be best compensated, we will all, in an Adam Smithian version of ways, be able to rise our tides. At the point where, under the greatest of laissez-faire administrations, that of George Bush, income inequality increased by its greatest margin in the history of our country, to the point to where 0.001% of our population controls 6% of GDP, to where poverty is at the highest level it has been by any economic indicator since the 1960s in the United States. I say, on the face of it, their assertions, when contrasted to our definition of arms, carries today. Because the pursuit of equality, Mr. Speaker, is a true sense not of material equality in and of itself, but the equality of the person to actualize within a society and to not be proactively prohibited by the elites who stratify and cut off their opportunity. What is it I'm going to bring to you in our summation today? I'm going to ask you two questions. First, what are the harms of pursuing wealth? And second, how does equality best serve society? But before I get into that, let us quietly address Sean's extension on opposing opposition, because we get a lot of interesting assertions himself. Because he attempts to say, first and foremost, look at our great examples. John D. Rockefeller, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, Warren Buffett. How wonderful is it that they're throwing out dimes and being able to set up maybe notable foundations. I like how they conveniently forgot Warren Buffett took a lot of flack for saying that redistributive policies are a good thing. In fact, me and Bill and Melinda Gates are going to donate all our money when we die back to the charities because we think that there is unequal proportions of wealth. So your own examples fall right on my face if you want to use that. Second, no thanks, Sean. I'll let you have it later. Next, what you hear is that he says, you also have a right to create your wealth and keep it for yourself because government had absolutely no goal in helping you at all. Right, because the protection of your property with police, court systems, roads that are paved, the ability to have intellectual property protected, the fact that you can actually have communications, you won't be dragged out in the street, shot, and have your property taken away. Yeah, government had no role in doing that at all. The free market regulated it through the invisible hand of beneficent actors. But then we hear from you, and this is quite amazing. I almost lost my speech with it. Was he said, look, we have to refute closing government because obviously, guys, it's votes that determine the leadership in our society, which I said, sure. And since you want to talk about the American dream, let me tell you about my personal American nightmare, my former governor, Sarah Palin. Made a little decision earlier in the year called Citizens United, which said what? Corporations, unlimited utilization of your wealth buys votes on all forms of communication. What does that mean? That communication buys consent. That consent buys votes. Those votes buy power. That power oppresses. And it corrupts itself and they do lecture us on the ability of free market economics when I see the deprivation within our own society. And then he attempts to tell you, give us an example of where it's worked. And though we don't necessarily have to apologize for all socialist societies, we do say that there was something redeeming in the fact that Cuba had substantial health reforms and great doctors and minimum standards of living that were meant to treat people as themselves. So when I ask you the first question today, which is, what are the harms of pursuing wealth? Let us surmise this in the following two ways. We look at opening opposition today when they say a couple of assertions. One, we think that people, and this is continued, of course, by closing opposition, have a right to pursue wealth, because without them, there would be lazy people sitting around, and social welfare nets would break under the weight of their own backs and the obesity levels it would somehow propagate. What I say to you is this, Mr. Speaker. If what we have in these two worlds at the end of the day is a society which rewards the accumulation of wealth, that accumulation of wealth is based upon an adversarial system of incentives. Take what Sean's words were. He says we need incentives. What kind of incentives? I say Goldman Sachs has tons of incentives. So much so that you can lie to your investors. So much so that you can have predatory lenders tell you that the American dream, if you're a poor black man from Detroit, is to take out a house and a mortgage for it that's less than your income, and you're poorer than ever before. And the system propagates itself in a positive feedback loop of poverty. We say that when you listen to the fact, as opening government told you, parents are actually overworking themselves 80 to 90 hours a week. Who's the collateral damage there? Your pursuit of wealth put children on the sidelines, and you attempt to make it up for them with the buying of material goods. We say that that is not pursuant to that as well. We say, therefore, that the pursuit to wealth in and of itself has horrible rises, but then finally they tell us that the pursuit of the wealth is the only way we got certain social benefits. Right, because NASA was completely out of the free market, guys. Our ability to have certain vaccines came from there as well. Let's not get into an evidence matter. Back half.
In a free society, people have every opportunity not to work 80 hours a week. They make that informed decision to do so because they think it's best for them.
Right, because when students are in so much debt in the United States, you are born not in the lucky sperm club of having your last name being Kennedy or Brockman or Bush. So a person like me has to be able to ride the ladder of the so-called meritocracy. Your meritocracy is flawed to the fact where in our society we need affirmative action because blacks can't even get into universities because of implicit racism. We say that to the point where there's a fundamental flaw in the equal access to educational opportunities, and you need lettuce of tons of degrees to be able to call yourself some certifiable person within society. That is a harm of accumulating wealth, and it's a status symbol which completely abrogates the rights of the poorest. Now, into my second question. How does equality best serve this? We completely side with our Confederates in open government today. They said, this is a principal debate, we say damn right it is. Why? Because if you're a Western liberal democracy, your consent through your ability to be ruled is on your ability not to be treated as a means to an end by the richest and most stratified within your society. It is not the ability of those individuals to reinvent the political paradigm which further encapsulates you in a mode of constant poverty. If you really want to show me how after 30 years of trickle-down economics, people's mouths still dry and are parched from the fact that they can't get access to education, that they are poorer than ever, and that the rich have gotten richer at the expense of them, I would gladly take you on those grounds. Because we believe that equality in and of itself is a principled stance that democracies take when you consider each individual, not your historical monarchs, not your dukes, not who your father was, but for who you were. That's exactly what it brought to you. The perils of not recognizing equality. You get diversity. You move. Our paradigm is not static. It can change. You can take principled grounds. Because the world is not meant to be set in stone, because there are evils on side opposition that they unknowingly defend, because this is the right thing to do. Vote wrong.
Taxation system. We're just saying, don't cap out a max salary. That's what we have to defend. That's the burden that was assigned to us by opening government. It's also not about, like, not wanting to have police that prevent us from getting shot in the streets. Like, we have that now. We've gotten that far based on the kind of system we've chosen. I mean, like, he has fantastic rhetoric and great anger about the injustice towards the poor, but it's kind of off the mark. What do I want to talk about? First of all, like, what does it mean to live in a country that is wealthy, and how exactly do we get there? And then second of all, what does wealth represent, and why should we continue to value it? First of all, what does it mean to live in a country that's wealthy? Because, like, guys, this is awesome. Like, it's easy to be cavalier about not needing more wealth generated for the country that you live in, but I think we've got our social blinders on this one. Because even in the US, where there are massive inequalities, that is a wealthy country. That is a wealthy society that is the envy of nations across the world for the standard that is provided even to the poorest in America. And like, that's if you can go to Walmart and buy a toaster for $15 and make your toast in the morning, and that's magic in a lot of other places. And that's a good thing. We should value that. We should be glad that people have worked towards innovating to create products that make that possible for you, that make this magical life that's completely unprecedented in all of human history available for us to enjoy. There's a fiction propagated by side government that the only source of wealth is internal to a country, that there's a certain amount of it and we trade it around. But it is possible for a country to generate more or less total wealth, and that happens in a couple of ways. One, in the way that Sean tells you, by deriving unique new benefits that help everyone, innovations in technology and healthcare, for instance. The other way in which we do it is by competing with other countries, by being a source of innovation that attracts other countries' money to us. And again, we do that by creating things that are new value. I mean, you know, a lot of wealth in the United States is premised on exporting products and driving innovation, for instance, in like information technology. And how does this come back to the question of a salary cap? Because the thing is, like, if we buy, there will still be some incentives for people to work, even if there's a cap. That's fine. But the incentive that you remove is precisely the one to generate a massive amount of value. To go out there and create the product that benefits everybody. And you know what? It takes a ton of work. Like, there are some people, sure, that are lucky. There may be a number of people lucky. I mean, like, that 0.01%. But for those people, for all of those people, there are also tons more who achieve wealth and who achieve value for society by putting hundreds of hours of work into it, by doing the work that nobody else wants to do. And they do that to produce something in the end, and if they don't have the incentive to do it, we don't get a magically wealthy country like the United States that has the innovations that we all love. And that's why we're going to be begging to oppose. I'll take back the extension speaker. Sorry.
Alright, so one of our money still has providing healthcare, except in social societies. Can you explain to me how your equality of opportunity actually exists and in a way that justifies the race that we can all?
I mean, like, look, since you know this actually leads into my next point. The next point is going to be, what is wealth and why should we value it? And I think that the important thing to get out of Sean's speech and out of this side of the house is that wealth is freedom. And why is this relevant to medical? Why is this the answer to the POI? So the thing is, it's becoming increasingly obvious that we actually can't afford to give everybody the standard of care that they might want as the population gets older and older. Like Western countries across the world are facing a crunch of paying for our elderly populations. So the thing is, I don't think the way that Second Crop thinks, that magically we will be able to provide everyone with all the health care that they need. I don't think there's the money for it. I don't think we'll be able to support that system. And I think that this is broadly borne out by the evidence today. So, everybody is faced with a question. Given that the government, in the end, will only ever be able to do so much for us. The question is, if what you find, like what you really value, is taking care of your health in old age, and knowing that no matter what happens to you, you might be able to pay for the treatment that you need, that is expensive, that society can't afford to pay for everyone. Why shouldn't you be allowed to put in a lot of work now at a sacrifice of your happiness now to ensure that when that day comes, you won't have to rely on a benevolent society whose wealth sources are mysterious to pay for that treatment for you? You will have planned ahead and exercised your freedom to accumulate wealth accumulate money is like being a little gnome of some kind. It's about wanting to sit down in your room of glittering riches and capital and to dread like the misfortune of others. That's not what it is. Wanting to accumulate wealth is about wanting to build stability for yourself and for your family and for the people that you care about. For knowing that you're preparing yourself for the future, for all of the unknowns, when you can't necessarily count on that communist society to keep functioning one day. Because the fact is, Cuba's in trouble. Fidel Castro said so. You need to know that you're providing for your own future and that you're not relying on this magical wealth that comes out of nowhere. And we think that that's the kind of freedom that in a democracy is so important. We say, provide the base standard like we do now, and that's sufficient for the vast majority of the harms that they posit. But maintain your freedoms and keep allowing us to live in a wealthy country that is the magical world we love. We beg to oppose.